Looking at my face is really putting me off. There we go.
There was an article by Gamesindustry.Biz which was about whether AAA single-player games are viable again. The industry likes to think that single-player is dying.
Single-player games are dead.
Even though literally no one who plays games actually thinks that. The article essentially says about how single-player games this year sold really, really well compared to previous years and compared to multiplayer games. And seems to have taken the world a bit by surprise. They look at games like God of War, Spider-Man, and Assassin's Creed. They've all done really, really well.
Yeah.
And none of them have any multiplayer component at all.
Which is perfect for me.
Which is grand, yes.
And you think about this in terms of last year, like the whole thing about, single player games are dead was based around the fact that PUBG did so well last year, Fortnite did so well last year, they're breaking records, they're making record revenues and all that kind of shit. And then the whole of the industry, the whole of gaming news, all the journalists come out with this, multiplayer games is where it's at, single player games are dead. And then there was that thing with the Star Wars...
the one with Visceral
Games getting shut down because they were working on a single player experience and there wasn't enough.
It didn't align with their business model. Their business model is games as a service.
There wasn't enough opportunities for current consumer spending, which is bullshit. They smashed that, and in the wake of that announcement, everyone was like, "Well, single player games are dead, aren't they?" No, just the people chasing money stop making single player games because they're just chasing fucking cash and they're not actually interested in making decent games. Come this year, you've got God of War smashed out the park. No multiplayer at all.
Nope.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yep. And you got Spider-Man again. Amazing game. Absolutely perfect. For me as well, Detroit Become Human. Single player game. No multiplayer. Absolutely perfect. Assassin's Creed again. And even, I haven't played that, but I won't call that perfect.
Well, I think for a lot of Assassin's Creed fans, it's good as Assassin's Creed. For a lot of people who don't care about Assassin's Creed, we're still not going to like it. It's still done well financially. That's kind of the
point of it. Yeah.
The point, yeah. The only people who believed that single player was dead were the publishers, because they can't make as much money out of it as you can with multiplayer, because multiplayer you can bastardize it with microtransactions and loot boxes, and you can keep pulling money out of the consumer's pocket.
It suits them.
Exactly.
It suits them. That's what they want. They want us to accept, and they want to feed us all this bullshit. Single player games, we're not going to make them anymore. We don't make enough money. So these big corporations are like, well, multiplayer games is the only games that are viable. Bullshit. You just want to make more money.
Yeah, and if you lie to the consumer, they seem to believe that the consumer will eventually start to be like, oh yeah, multiplayer games are the way forward. And they're trying to trick us psychologically, but it's not working.
It's a narrative that fits their agenda.
Exactly. Bollocks.
And it's bollocks. we smell this shit out a mile away. Yeah.
But then you look at these games mentioned. God of War sold 3.3 million copies in 3 days, which is absurd. And that meant that they beat the record for fastest selling first party game on the PS4 out of lots of very successful games on that console, like Uncharted, Horizon. They're all really good critically, but this one just sold amazingly. And then just a few months later, Spider-Man walks in, it's like, hold my beer. Coming in with like 3.3 million as opposed to 3.1 million.
Boom.
And then back to Assassin's Creed, had the strongest launch for the franchise this generation. That's after Origins. Origins was pretty well received. Yeah. Sort of reboot for the franchise.
Yeah, well,
more like a style reboot.
That was a game that they took 2 years out to make, because it was yearly up until that point. And apparently the game took twice as long to make. However, its Origins sold twice as much as the previous Assassin's Creed entry.
Corey Barlog, who people may know as the game director for God of War, he said in an interview with IGN that single players are like the phoenix at the moment, as if they were dead, but now they're rising from the ashes again, kind of like an underdog coming back better than ever before.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily agree, because I'm not sure they ever did burn. I think in that end, so the development end, I can kind of see that you might think that financially anyway.
Yeah.
The big multiplayer ones often do well, and the single player ones, while the quality is good, they don't necessarily hit those numbers like a Call of Duty or a Battlefield or anything like that.
To say that single player games are rising from the dead, you have to accept that single player games died in the first place, which based on that premise, I don't agree with what he says, because you've got to assume that single player games died. But for people like myself who predominantly play single player games never died. They just alright, there wasn't enough AAA single player games at the time. Maybe I switched my focus to indie games, or I found my fix essentially.
Yeah, you will
never
always
died.
Find it. Yeah,
we're talking about a very specific context here, where single player games dead. We're talking about the cream of the highest production production values for games, we're talking about the biggest AAA games, the biggest publishers, the biggest game developers, and the most money going into games, right?
Yeah.
And that very top end on the creme de la creme of game budgets, single player games died off because everyone's chasing money at that point. When you get to that top cream tier, everyone's chasing money. And for Cory Barlog to say that single player games are a phoenix at this point, I think he's referring specifically to that very cream at the top.
Confidence more than anything is a thing that I think the comeback that people are talking about is where that's focused.
Yeah.
Because single player, it can be a bit of a risk because there's not the guarantee of like recurring players as there are with multiplayer. Multiplayer has more longevity typically with consumers than single player. So I think now that publishers are seeing how well single player is doing on its own without any multiplayer, they're like, okay, so this is, as Gamesindustry.Biz say, a viable financial option. I just disagree that they were ever dead in the first place.
No, but it fits the narrative, right? Because if these game developers are thinking what my next project's going to be, how do we develop our next game? Do we have to go multiplayer because there's no money left in single player? And that's the narrative that they might have been exposed to. For Cory Barlog to come out and say this, to say that single player games are a phoenix, and for the success of God of War, Assassin's Creed, and Spider-Man this year, getting huge headlines. Red Dead Redemption as well is another example, because if you leave out the online portion of that, the game did really well commercially at launch. That is now something that might influence these people making decisions about where their next game's going to be. These developers who are at a creative crossroads, I guess. Yeah. If they decide based on all these good results for single player games that single player games are viable, then that's good. That is good. That is good for the industry, and that's why I can agree that Cory Barlog should say things like this.
Yeah, because it'll inspire his peers more than us as the audience.
Yes,
so to speak.
Exactly.
It'll be people in his immediate sphere and his teams, because he's going to have underlings.
Yes.
To be like, yeah, we can make single player. So I imagine for a lot of devs, they're building like a really cool idea. They've got this story, but they're like, multiplayer, like it's going to make us a lot more money. And then not from like a greed perspective, but with more money coming in, they can spend that and send more things out. So they might be pressured, perhaps is the wrong word, but enticed into doing the multiplayer thing because it's more profitable. But then if you look at successes with these single player games and Cory Barlog being like, oh no, there is this Phoenix-like resurgence. Yeah. I think they might be like, okay, no, we can do single player and it can work.
I think pressure is the right word in a lot of ways, because if you think that a mid-sized developer needs to be concerned with how much money they're making off a game, and if they feel like that the game that they're creating is not going to be financially a success for them, they're not going to make their money back, they're not going to be able to pay bills because the game isn't selling so well, there might be the pressure there that eking into the minds and that thought process where if I just make it multiplayer, or if there's any sort of multiplayer, maybe that'll sell more. Because there's always that, Fortnite's done so well because it's multiplayer, there's PUBG's done massively because multiplayer, all these multiplayer games, you can sell microtransactions, this and that. I think the bigger conversation here is around how much these games cost to make. There's so very little information out there about how much a game actually costs to make.
You can't really quantify it.
Yeah, I mean, the devs aren't open and honest about this type of thing. All right, Jason Schreier might put a couple of articles together and say that his anonymous sources have told him this and told him that. But realistically, it's a very grey area in terms of reporting on and understanding exactly what pressures these game developers are under at any specific level within the industry.
Exactly. One of my favourite things that this article does touch on is the industry's move away from tacked on multiplayer, because you get games built for multiplayer and they do really, really well. But then there was a time where they list like a bunch of them when they're traditionally single player games or franchises, and then in one of the entries they just stick a multiplayer in, and that's not like a blight on the quality of that, but it's just kind of there. Some of the ones they listed were like Xbox 360, PS3 era games like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Batman Arkham Origins, Bioshock 2, Dead Space 3, Metal Gear Solid 4, and Ninja Gaiden 3. Yeah. All of those traditionally single player focused franchises with this extra multiplayer component that's not necessarily bad. Like, I know I had fun for a couple of hours in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood's multiplayer, but it didn't like hook me. I didn't stay with it. I played it for a bit. I was like, this is alright, and then moved on.
This is a weird one, right? Because you've got to assume that the outside pressure to do this, to tack on this this multiplayer component of a traditionally first player game, must have come from publishers, must have come from the people who decide that how we're going to make money off this product. It's more to do with making a full product that you can sell to the most amount of people. And I think that's where games go wrong, or went wrong a lot of the time. Especially Dead Space 3 was one of those ones that got criticised for the fact that it lost a core of what the game was, because it just tried to appeal to too many people, and it lost this horror element, and it's well documented that a game suffered because of the pressures put on it to have the multiplayer component.
It's definitely good that the industry has moved away from this, because it means that we can get more focused experiences, be that single player player or multiplayer. Because with Call of Duty, realistically, most people don't get the biggest amount of time out of it, the most fun out of it from the single player. You can complain about Black Ops 4 lacking a campaign if you want. I know it does put me off, but I wasn't going to buy that in the first place anyway. So not bothering to do a campaign isn't like a bad thing to me, because they're like, well, multiplayer is what we're good at, so we can take those resources and that time spent and focus on making the multiplayer component the best it can possibly be. And a lot of people have praised the multiplayer.
The success of Call of Duty this year has done well for the industry, I think, because if the people that complained that there was no single player, I get that they're going to miss out on the single player component. However, the fact that Call of Duty has been very specific in what its appeal is, and just appealing to a very specific type of gamer, the online gamer, the same as the way that God of War dealt with specifically the single player gamer, and the way that the games have been trying to appeal to single players and multiplayer gamers alike across the field, that is starting to go away, and people are starting to realize that. And hopefully the success of Call of Duty consolidates that in the minds of the publishers and developers, that understand that a game has to be something very specific. It can't try and appeal to everybody, because you'll end up appealing to nobody.
Exactly.
It has to have something very appealing at its core in order to attract people in the first place, because if you're just chasing cash, trying to throw in loads of different elements and gameplay types and stuff into your game, then eventually you'll fall on your arse, and hopefully that's the lesson that's been learned.
It's really important to know your audience, what you're trying to make and who you're trying to make it for. In a lot of cases, it's better to be amazing at something than just average at everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And Call of Duty are good at multiplayer, whether or not it's your kind of multiplayer. They know what they're doing, and they're capitalizing on that.
And that makes more room in the industry for games who do single player really well, like Wolfenstein, or single player first person experience like Metro series, which I've been playing. Single player narrative linear first person shooters, they're out there. Like, you don't need Call of Duty for that, because there are other games out there that arguably do it a lot better than Call of Duty ever did. So I think that Call of Duty being very specialist in what they're giving to the consumer now, that is a good thing for other developers who want to fill the gap that the single player portion left, for example.
So you could get more games coming out solely single player, but doing Call of Duty like things, military based shooter experiences, proper story driven, but in that kind of military lens. Like game on 360 generation called Spec Ops The Line came out, and pretty much no one bought it because it just looked like another military shooter, and because Call of Duty was dominating, no one really cared. But that game is really good. There's loads of like weird psychological shit that happens in it. So if we get more experiences like that, I think that'll be great, because it's a market that hasn't been given its due credit. The war quote unquote genre. You get some really good war movies like Saving Private Ryan. Like, I want a game of that quality and scale, but of a single player focused experience. I think that'll be awesome if someone can do it right.
Oh, definitely.
Without filling it with multiplayer nonsense.
Call of Duty last year, for example, World War II, that was something that I was really excited for, because it kind of appealed to the older gamer in me who appreciated the old Medal of Honor type games where, you know, you arrive on the beach and it's that D-Day experience where it was just like Saving Private Ryan, bullets whistling past your ear and stuff like that, and it's really intense and atmospheric. But however, you look at what they did with World War II last year, where it was just like it was forcing cinematics into it and taking a lot of control away from the player in order to force you to look at this big explosion that we've rendered, look at this awesome big set piece that we've got over here. That isn't gameplay. What that is like trying to force a movie experience into a game. Give me something to worry about myself. Give me something that's immersive, that you don't have to force me to do things in, because that isn't immersive.
See, God of War walked that balance perfectly, because there'd be a big cutscene set piece thing, and then it's like, all right, training wheels come off, now you've got to deal with the fight, now you've got to deal with what's going on, and then it's like, okay, you've done that, let's pull out big cinematic thing, and then we're going to come back down again. And you need to have the scale and then the closeness, which puts the player in control. So that's what games are. They makes you feel powerful and to feel like a superhero and all that. So in raw numbers, Call of Duty made 500 million domestically, so in the US, in 3 days. If you look at the movie industry, which is a comment the article highlights really nicely, Avengers Infinity War, undeniably one of the biggest movies ever. It made 258 million in its opening weekend. So that's the film industry.
So that's half.
That's like half. That's just to like scale it.
Just to illustrate how popular and really well that Call of Duty did this year, because you can talk numbers all you want, but unless you've got some sort of
to compare it
to,
But then if you go back just a couple of years and look at Black Ops 2, that made 500 million in 24 hours. So in one day.
Wow.
You could argue it's a shift in public perception towards Call of Duty or industry things, or could it be that because that one did have a single player, there's a kind of speculative debate to be had about whether Black Ops 4 would have done even better if it did have a single player. To be honest, I don't really think it would have.
Yeah, microtransactions are bigger in the industry than they ever have been. If you compare with Black Ops 2, they're probably making many multiples what they made in microtransactions on a game like Black Ops 2. And that's the trend that you're seeing with the likes of EA and things like that, offering games day one on like a subscription service. I don't care about unit sales anymore. That's not their business model. The business model is these subscriptions and these people who are buying microtransactions. Because microtransactions, they make up over half of the revenue that the industry takes these days. It's really huge. You think about that 500 million that they made in that opening weekend. They've made the same amount again just in microtransactions, but that isn't reported, is it?
No.
So, I mean, it looks like Call of Duty did really, really well this year, but it's made a fuck ton more money than is reported. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's done well so far, but it's going to keep doing well for a long time.
Yeah, it's going to have a long time.
And they're going to sustain it for ages. Well, I say ages until next year when they bring out another one. Ubisoft have come out and said that they want to put multiplayer back into the Assassin's Creed franchise. Whether or not that's like a patch to add in multiplayer to Odyssey, which I think is probably unlikely at this point, but in the next one, probably next year, I would expect to see a multiplayer component, unfortunately.
I think Igamo, the CEO at Ubisoft, has gone on record saying that cloud computing is the future. And you saw, I think it was in Japan, that the Assassin's Creed this year was available to stream on the Switch through a third-party streaming service. So there is this push with these big developers, especially Ubisoft, since Igamo's on record as saying that this is the future, among these bigger publishers to seek out these experiences. So multiplayer being a part of that, you've got to assume that that's what they're looking at doing. I always think back to Watch Dogs 2, where there's no need for multiplayer to be in that game. It's not done as a separate Unity thing like GTA 5, for example, or GTA Online, where you go and play specifically online. You're in your game, and then you have people riding on motorbikes like flying past your face while you're playing your single player game. Get out of my game. I never want that in a game. I never ever want that. Why would you ever want that? And I think if they do that again in Assassin's, it's like the first thing I'll do is turn off the multiplayer component of the game.
Red Dead is a perfect example of how to do really good single player and have a decent multiplayer as well, not feeling like tacked on. Because a lot of people want it for the single player and a lot of people want it for the multiplayer. But if they did Assassin's Creed multiplayer thing like that, where it's got its own space, its own like mode,
it makes sense.
I can play on my own without some idiot just fucking it up. And that's my biggest criticism of Red Dead Online at the moment, is that I just want to
just the online just the other people.
Like just other humans. Like playing it with your mates and stuff would be cool. I really like the cooperative missions and that. But I just fucking hate getting grief
so
all
annoying,
the time.
aren't they?
It's like,
just people are annoying.
I'm like, I can kill them, but the amount of satisfaction I get from killing them isn't as annoying as it is when they kill me, so it doesn't balance out. It's not worth it. The ultimate question is single player really making a comeback? For publishers, it means that there's a confidence restored with them that they can do it, and then that's like a trickle down effect. So if the guys at the top are doing it, because indies will always still be doing single player, because that's more experimental market, but the lower level, the people who aren't Ubisofts and EAs and all that, they're going to be like, oh yeah, okay, we can make what we actually want to make without having to pander to the multiplayer market, because that's what people want. I think from that perspective, yes, they are making a comeback, but for consumers, they're not making a comeback because they never went anywhere in the first place.
Exactly. This whole conversation is around the AAA creme de la creme tier of game production. The main takeaway for me is that this year's shown us that single player, it's not going anywhere.
It's alive and well.
You think about all the success of single player games that have made this year, specifically, Sony and the exclusives that they've knocked out of the park. But the fact that Call of Duty's been so successful, being very specialist in multiplayer too, it leaves more space for single player AAA games to come out and say, well, they've done it, they've succeeded. Call of Duty isn't doing it anymore. Other people are moving out of our way. Why not let's just do what we want to do and not pander to these big publishers who say we have to tack it on just to make more money, because it can be successful on its own, because this is the evidence right here.
We'll just never listen to publishers. The developers, generally, they're the good guy because they're like us. They make games because they love games. The publishers are there to make money and profits and stuff. They're not all evil, but there's a certain angle that they see things, and there's an agenda.
I mean, let's not demonize them too much here, because money is necessary, because without money, nothing happens. It's easy to say that, they're just greedy, they just want this and that. There is a line, though. There is a line when
course.
The likes of Bobby Kotick, who is the Activision Blizzard CEO, taking home like $20-30 million a year in bonus on top of his salary, your microtransaction money, essentially.
Exactly. So you should be making your product to break even and then have a little bit of profit. But you should have enough to make your game and then divvy out any extras with everybody. None of this CEO box, but that's in like every industry. It's not just the games thing. But yeah, don't listen to publishers when they try and tell us as consumers what we want. EA have done it before, saying games as a service is like the only way forward and all that. I'm like, right, you can think that. I'm not going to think that single player is dead just because you say so.
Yeah, sure. And I think that more and more, especially in the YouTubers come out and they tell the truth a lot of the time. All right, a lot of it is hyperbole, but this narrative that games industry and games publishers or whatever, that general games media report on, that single player games are dead and all this bullshit, that hopefully there's enough YouTubers like us out there saying, nah, it's just bullshit. Eventually, people will become enlightened and realize that is just fits their narrative.
Fits their narrative. Yeah, just try and think for yourself. Like, if you like something, that's fine. Now, if you like it, you like it. And I like single player, and it's probably going to stay the same forever, to be honest.
That is true. There's always going to be people wanting to play single player, that's for sure.
I have a lot of fun playing games like Until Dawn, which are single player, story driven, but with a group.
Yeah.
Where you can all weigh in on decisions and stuff. I think that's my favourite kind of multiplayer. I like cooperative multiplayer, playing games like Gears of War.
You're more like a couch co-op experience where you can enjoy in a social environment with friends.
Working together to build a better world. Part of it's just because I'm so shit at video games. If I'm playing competitively, I just get fucked. And I'm like, all right, I'll go over to a single player and have like a power fantasy and kill everyone.
This video is an extract from our weekly podcast, a podcast which you can only see if you head over to patreon.com/prettygoodgaming. If you want to support the channel, why not head over there and see what all the awesome rewards you can get for being a patron and supporting our specific brand of toxicity here on YouTube. We're not really that toxic.
Well, a little bit.
It's debatable.
Just a little bit.